If you know how the world financial system works, you know the game that you're playing. And if you don't know the game and the rules that we're playing by, you're going to get slaughtered. You are going to get slaughtered. Ever since the Federal Reserve was born, we have been living under a lie. In order for us to maintain the levels we've got and to maintain the prosperity, Obama has to be twice as far in debt when he leaves office than when he came in, or the whole thing is starting to collapse. The Federal Reserve, they're buying bonds directly from the Treasury. This is quantitative easing, they're calling it. And that means there's an emergency going on. I could see that there wasn't anything in history as far as finances go that was as much of a sure thing as gold and silver accounting for the expansion of the fiat currency supply. There's absolutely no chance in hell that this won't happen. Right now it takes about $15,000 to $20,000 an ounce gold. I believe that there's going to be deflation first, and then all of the world's central banks will start printing like crazy to get us out of that deflation, and Ben Bernanke will be leading the charge. For the people that have not read my book, about 75% of it is not about investing in gold and silver. It's some history of money, and then how the global economy works and what could potentially happen. You know, so it's where we came from, where we are today, and what could potentially happen. And I don't want anybody to get slaughtered. I really don't want these bad things to happen. I just think that all the evidence is there that what our leaders have done to the economic system is going to cause these things to happen, and it's inevitable. And I am trying to warn as many people as possible, as quickly as possible. My company has a mission to get as much gold and silver in the hands of the middle class as quickly as possible, because when there is great economic upheaval, there is great political change. It usually goes along with it. And I know that there's certain people that I'm not going to be able to reach. Joe Sixpack, I refer to, the guy that comes out of his beer and football-induced coma at the very end of a bull market and comes charging in and buys at the peak. I can't do anything for him. I'm hoping that I can do something for all of you. I'm going to take a little detour here. I did not define the difference between currency and money, and you will hear me say currency, currency, currency over and over and over again. Back before World War I, each note that a treasury issued, each dollar in existence in the United States, would say that there have been deposited with the United States Treasury $20 in gold coin payable to the bearer upon demand. The money was in the vault. The currency was a note they gave you that was a claim check, only a claim check on the money, the same as if you go to the dry cleaners and you give them your shirt and they give you a claim check for your shirt. The value is that shirt at the dry cleaners, not the piece of paper that says that you own that shirt. So our currency that circulated was the paper US dollars, and they were claim checks on money. And people do not understand that money has to be a store of value. Only gold and silver qualify as money. They have all the attributes that you need. They're portable, durable, divisible, fungible, and then money is a store of value over long periods of time. So this, just by knowing this, increases your odds just 100-fold of winning. When you or I write a check, there must be sufficient funds in our account to cover the check. But when the Federal Reserve writes a check, there is no bank deposit on which that check is drawn. When the Federal Reserve writes a check, it is creating money. And that is, putting it simply, from the Boston Federal Reserve's website. The way this works is, in the United States, it's the US Treasury. So the treasuries around the world create a bond. And what is a bond? A bond is just an IOU. Loan me $1 trillion and I promise that over a 30-year period I'm going to pay you back $2 trillion. That's basically a bond, IOU. And there's something in the middle here called open market operations that I'm going to just show you real quickly, but the open market operations is just a shell game that obscures what is truly going on. So banks show up at the Treasury auctions, the primary dealers they're called, and then the Federal Reserve comes along and through open market operations, they write a check to the bank and they buy that bond from the bank. So the Federal Reserve ends up with the bond. But then the next month, those banks show up at the Treasury auction again. Now the Treasury has the dollars and the Federal Reserve has the bond. And this process repeats itself over and over and over again. And there's a buildup of dollars at the Treasury and bonds at the Federal Reserve. So we borrow currency into existence with an IOU, that bond, and the Federal Reserve opens up their big old checkbook that doesn't have a single penny in it and writes a bad counterfeit check and hands that to the Treasury. Dollars spring into existence. Then the Treasury deposits that in the various branches of the government, and the government does some deficit spending on social programs, public works, and war. And then they pay those government workers, the contractors, and the soldiers, and all of those people deposit it in their private banks. Banks create money by monetizing the private debts of businesses and individuals. Federal Reserve Bank of New York. So it's really just a couple of bucks that is whipped up in this little voodoo hocus pocus scheme here where the Treasury and the Federal Reserve write out IOUs for each other. A check is an IOU, a bond is an IOU, and they swap IOUs, dollars spring into existence. It becomes real when you work for some of that currency supply, that number supply, and at that point, it now represents your blood, sweat, labor, ideas, and talent. You are what gives the currency supply value. It would have no value without you. Ever since the Federal Reserve was born, we have been living under a lie. And if people say that we've got free markets in the United States, they are wrong. You cannot have free markets without free market money. Your currency is 50% of every transaction. All of the transactions are the free market. If there's a small group of men deciding what currency is and how much the cost of currency is going to be, the interest rate, that isn't a free market. We do not have free markets. We haven't had since the year 1913. Then we have something called the Bretton Woods system. The classical gold standard broke down. The Bretton Woods system was from 1944, where all of the world's currencies would be backed by the US dollar at $35 an ounce, and foreign central banks only could exchange those dollars for gold at the New York Fed for $35 per ounce. So all the world's currencies were pegged to gold, but through the US dollar. All of these countries started asking for dollars, and gold flowed out of the vaults, and Nixon had to take us off the gold standard in 1971. So you've got 30 to 40 years, 30 years, 28 years, 39 years plus. What's next? In this decade, there's going to be an emergency meeting of the G7 or the G20 countries, and they're going to be trying to hash out a new world monetary system, and they're already working on it. They're trying to figure out what they're going to do when the dollar collapses. This is the gold panic in 1948 in Shanghai. If you wait until the last minute, I'm not very good at swearing. Robert Kiyosaki is great at it, so I usually don't swear much on stage. But if you wait until the last minute, you are shit out of luck, up shit creek without a paddle in a barbed wire canoe, fucked. Here's one thing that people do not realize. It does not take Ben Bernanke to print the dollar into oblivion for gold to go to $10,000 an ounce, $50,000 an ounce, $100,000 an ounce. All it takes are a few very wealthy investors to try and get theirs before the masses wake up and the herd comes charging in. This is the masses, and they will be, these are the people waking up out of their beer and football-induced comas and coming in at the last second. Well, this is a sort of a different situation because their currency is going to go to zero because of war, but basically, you got to get in ahead of the trend and then get out when everybody else is panicking like that. You know, our entire currency system is imaginary. It doesn't really exist. It's just that we're all dreaming the same dream. If anybody chooses to wake up, it's over with.